welcome to another Britflicks.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's returning guest is writer-director Mark Brown. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good to be back.
Indeed, indeed. Now, you've come on to share your 3 films that have impacted everything in adult life, and we'll get onto them soon, and we'll talk about how that works for anyone that's first time hearing the format. But first, I want to talk to you about your film Dead on the Vine.
Sure, that'd be lovely.
Very exciting. So to keep that excitement up, do you want to tell people what Dead on the Vine is about?
It's a thriller that involves these 2 chaps who are just driving out of the lovely town of Rye on a sunny day. And then one of them has an epileptic fit, and they have to pull into the nearest place, which happens to be this beautiful vineyard, which is run by these 2 women who are in preparation for a business-saving wine tasting. And all seems fine until the chap who had the epileptic fit wakes up, and he's not quite as stable as people might like. And things happen, and it all gets a bit dark, and lots of moral choices have to be made. And yeah, I don't want to give too much away at this point. But
no, that sounds good. That sounds good. So with that in mind, then, for a thriller like that, for you as a writer, what was the kernel of the idea that got you on the path to writing Dead on the Vine? Where does it start for you?
It was sort of 2 ideas. And again, this is a film that could only have existed because COVID happened and the other things didn't exist. So the 2 main characters, the 2 guys, they came from a play that I was meant to be doing, that we had it booked in Islington, meant to be in April of that year.
And what was that play called?
It was called Punching Horses.
Okay.
And it was it was a very violent and funny play, I think. And I love those characters, but it got shut down by COVID, so they just were sat doing nothing. And I'd also been pitching ideas for an outbreak film, for no good reason, I can't think. And so when my producer Laura came to me and said, I've got a vineyard, and I'd kind of come to her with a similar sort of idea of, can we make a film? Because I'm going to go crazy in lockdown. So she was like, I've got this vineyard. What have you got? And I was like, I'll come up with an idea. So I just basically got these two crazy characters and transposed them into this, what was an outbreak idea about these two criminals who end up in a farm, and I changed it to a vineyard, and then I added the 2 female characters into it. And kind of just went from there. I was like, what? Because it was COVID, so we had no cast, we had no extras, we had no things. We had these 4 actors, essentially. And I was like, well, so I've got to work with that then. And so I just kind of extrapolated, why would a massive vineyard, 70-acre vineyard, have only 2 people on it? Why would these 2 guys be doing what they're doing? And I collided them together, and kind of decided chaos would happen, obviously.
So in that sense then, so what for you was the main writing challenge of taking a play and turning it into this very different film, but using the same characters?
It wasn't too big a challenge. I got sent videos of the vineyard because my producer, her husband, who was also the DOP on Dead on the Vine, he had, because they were mates with the guy at the vineyard, so he'd done all their publicity. He'd done all these drone videos and all these publicity videos that were all beautifully cinematic and showed off the vineyard amazingly. So I had this map right in front of me of the location, and I think I work quite well once I know a location. I can think of the set pieces, I can think of the story around that, and then we talked to the guy that ran the vineyard, and he was telling us about how this sustainable vineyard worked and how the struggles of it, and how so kind of where the name came from, Dead on the Vine, that because we had quite a cold spring, that's the year before, a lot of the grapes had died on the vine.
Oh wow!
I was like, that's a cool title, and so I thought, all right, these two women have a struggling business. You know, nature has done them in. There's a veiled nod to Brexit and the lack of, you know, people to work on things.
Yeah, nice.
And but I didn't want to date it. I didn't want to reference that directly. The two characters, they're toned down from the play. The play, obviously, you can be a lot more absurd and extreme in theatre with the realism or the lack of realism in many ways. And so that wasn't going to work on film. So they were kind of toned down and made a bit more realistic. And I'd always wanted to do something to do with a bit mental health issues, but I'm not very good at doing the sort of serious Ken Loach kind of stuff. I can't be that serious. So I took it in a bit more of a thriller horror way, and but I think it's true to life from my own experiences and the experiences of a lot of people I know, but pushed to a level that is a bit more cinematic, shall we say?
Yeah.
And it also seemed to meld together quite well, I guess. I mean, I think, you know, you've been locked down for 3 months with no kind of focus. All of a sudden, when you do have focus, you're really focused. And so I was more than happy to spend all my brain power just working out these stories. And I was very lucky to get a writing job just before lockdown. And that kind of bled into lockdown a bit. But once that finished, I was just writing, but it was just having that fear of the industry never coming back. It was like, what I'm going to keep writing, but will these ever see the light of day? Any of these things that I'm putting down? And so to have an actual end game to it was incredible for my mental health. It was.
I could imagine.
Yeah, really kind of pushed me through, and it also gave me a reason to avoid my children for a couple of hours a day, because homeschooling isn't fun. And I love them to bits, but you know, stuck in a house with my son would have been 2.5, and my daughter would have been like 6. That was they needed to run around a lot more than they were able. So it was. They were just like 2 perpetually exploding hand grenades around my house all the time. My son was potty training as well, so he was just walking around naked and pissing on the floor. And we were like, no, he had like 7 potties around the house, and he didn't manage to hit any of them for the first month or so. So, you know, you can imagine, you know, things were getting frayed within my brain. And so, yeah, I was more than happy just to shut myself away and live in the world of these characters and meld this story together. And, you know, I sent once I'd done a first draft, you know, I sent it to a few people and got the feedback. And I think what I learned, because we had this, I mean, the time frame of this film was insane. We had the idea of doing it on May the 9th.
Yeah.
And we were on set on July 17th.
Wow.
And, you know, my producer, Laura, was incredible. She just managed to pull together this crew, again, who were all in a similar position to us, just like desperate to be out of the house, desperate to be working. And 2 weeks in a beautiful vineyard in July was quite appealing to a lot of people. And I put together the cast. But I guess I think what might have gone by the wayside a little bit was, I think we found this in the edit anyway, the script probably needed another going over.
Yeah.
Because we ended up cutting out like 10, 12 minutes from the beginning of the film. I had this idea, and it's sort of there in the film now, but let's just say it was drawn out a little bit too much in the original in the first cut, and so it was quite brutal doing the edit, and just like
I bet.
Chop, chop, chop. Because there's some really nice dialogue, but you know what it's like. You write all these beautiful words, and then you get some script dude to go, that has to go. And we didn't have the time, I guess, and to do that. And so the second cut was brutal.
Well, look, congratulations on getting that film done and getting your world premiere under your belt. Look forward to the UK premiere. And thank you for sharing that experience. It feels like every time I do one of these because obviously I'm in that run now where I'm talking to people of like, I did this during COVID. So it's kind of like hearing the different stories and the reasons and the relief, the challenges, the fears and all that surrounded it.
Next year, there'll be no COVID stories next year. We hope.
So let's move into your 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Before we get into it, let me just explain the rules to the new listener who's come to us. Mark has given me 3 film titles. We will work through the 3 film titles. We'll do them in release date order. I'll shout them out and you can tell me, then we'll start talking about the memories. But there's a catch to this, a little bit of jeopardy. We're doing the 3 films and we're doing it against the clock. So every time 5 minutes are up, we're going to hear this sound, which you can hear perfectly well at your end there, Mark.
I can hear it a bit, yeah.
So, without further ado, and I suppose I should just add as well, this is about films that made you sort of fall in love with the form, films. It's not necessarily the best films you've ever seen. It's more about how, why we love film and what these films mean to you, memories of watching it, who we saw them with, where we saw them, those kind of things, as much as it is about, what happens in the film. So if I start at the oldest film in your 3, it's 1971, and we've took a Canadian director out to Australia to shoot a movie called Waking Fright.
So this is the one I saw the last of the 3 that I've chosen, and I saw it quite recently, and it was just, it blew my brains out as a film. Waking Fright. It's the best version of the descent into hell that I've ever seen, and I just couldn't believe it when I was like, and it's been so long since a film has hit me.
Out of interest, then, if how did it come into your hands, as it were, to see it for the first time? How did that? What was the journey there?
Well, I've been wanting to see it for absolutely years.
Yeah,
and it wasn't a film that was easy to come by in any way, shape, or form, despite its critical acclaim. And as Ted Kotcheff will tell you a million times over in any interview, that it was one of the first films to be accepted into the Cannes Classics section. It was the first or second film ever to be shown twice at Cannes. And I'd always been intrigued by Ted Kotcheff, the director, because he directed First Blood, which was one of my first. And again, First Blood was going to be on this list. But I thought Waking Fright would be more interesting to talk about, since I don't think that many people have actually seen it. So Ted Kotcheff was always a director that I was like, why isn't he as big as, all the other directors that are massive? And his life story is incredible. It's really bizarre. Like, his family all came over from Bulgaria, and most of his family were massacred in the 30s and 40s, and it was really horrible. And then he lived in Cabbagetown in Canada, which is a real place. And so Waking Fright was he'd done loads of stuff. He did amazing TV stuff in the UK. And but Australia was one of the few places that had a decent film, because he was banned from America. That's right, because they thought he was a communist. So one of the few places that had a film industry outside of the UK was Australia. So he went to Australia to do Waking Fright. And I don't know if you haven't seen it, it's horrific at times, like with the famous kangaroo slaughter scene, which in fact was sort of almost documentary style.
Well, it is, isn't it? I mean, there's a full disclaimer at the end that this was a real kangaroo.
Yeah, it was real. He went on a real hunt. Ted Kotcheff's a proper sort of wonderful lefty animal lover, and so he refused to do any kind of real death. But he did do real death. But he just went on a hunt and filmed it.
Yeah,
and it's really horrifying and visceral, but it did change the laws in Australia. But anyway, this is all sort of by the by of how it affected me. I came by it after listening to Ted Kotcheff's autobiography, as you can probably tell, and I just splashed out and bought it on the special edition Blu-ray. And it took me ages to sit down and watch it because I just knew I was going to be horrified by it, and I was, but I was surprised how entertained I was by it. And I've always loved Australian cinema, always loved that kind of inherent humor that Australians just seem to have through all their films, and this is no different. You know, it's like it's about an English teacher who is English, who's stuck in the outback, and he has to essentially do his time in the outback before he's allowed to come back and teach in normal civilization.
Yeah, he's like paid a deposit that he doesn't get.
That's right.
He doesn't get returned to him unless he does his full semester.
That's right. Yeah, and so he's trying to leave on the school holiday to go somewhere nice, and he just can't get out, and he keeps encountering all these.
Well, he can get out. He just has a beer, and then that.
Well, he keeps getting offered beers. It sounds like a comedy, doesn't it? But it's not. And he keeps getting offered beers, but being made to drink them by these like insanely masculine Australians, and it just sends him down this rabbit hole of, oh God, it's like toxic masculinity of like hunting and fighting and living in these towns where there's no women, so these men only have each other to kind of touch, but their touching is fighting. You know, it's an incredible essay on toxic masculinity, and then you got Donald Pleasance, who is this alcoholic doctor who seems to be the only self-aware person in the whole film, and yet he is almost the worst of them. You know, and
there's our 5 minutes. I wanted to add, and I don't know whether Kotcheff talks about this in his biography, but Peter O'Toole was originally earmarked to play the role that Gary Bond plays as the school teacher. Yeah,
and the guy, Gary, I think he looks just like Peter O'Toole, which is it's crazy. Yeah, he's a stunt double.
And out of interest, have you been and explored the novel that it's adapted from?
No, I haven't. I mean to, but I haven't.
What's with you mentioning Donald Pleasance? What's fascinating about, because I remember this played at Fright Fest when it got remastered as a 2K ahead of the Eureka Blu-ray coming out. So I guess that'd be 2014 or 15 or something. And I immediately got obsessed with it from that point on. So I got the Blu-ray when it come out, and then I got the book. And if you read the book, what's interesting is there is the part of Donald Pleasance isn't really in the film. Isn't really in the book.
Really?
What they do for the adaptation is they take all the internal dialogue that goes on within the Gary Bond character and put that in the mouth of the Doctor character. So all his fears are kind of subverted into attacks. It's really clever. Fantastic. It's really clever as a piece of adaptation.
The character is an incredible character as well. The creation of Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, I mean, that is a complete cinematic creation. He's very, very. He's a character in the book. Don't get me wrong. He's there, but he doesn't have any major role to play other than be part of the madness that's there. Whereas he is like the ringleader of the madness at some points.
Yeah, because his character is like this. He's a friend who gets. You realize more and more and more how utterly involved in the insanity of this place is. And it's really quite horrifying, and I just loved it. And I think I put him on a list the other day of Oscar-worthy performances that no one knows about, and I was like, Donald Pleasance in Wake in Fright is just insanely good.
Well, in this film, and if you see him in a film called Death Train, have you seen that one?
Death Train. Oh my God, I saw that like as a kid.
Yeah, when he plays the cantankerous sort of police chief who stirs his tea with a dart.
Yes, the dart. Oh my God, I saw this like as a kid. I've not seen it like as an adult at all. So I've got very vague.
If you watch it as an adult, you play these two films back to back and you just go, Donald Pleasance really was like an underrated acting talent because he's left your own. But anyway, sir, let us move forward.
Right.
We're going to
Breaking the
jump
rules.
forward 3 years to 1974 for the hugely satirical, hugely funny Blazing Saddles. Where does that come in? Where are you seeing that for the first time, and how are you seeing it?
I saw that with my family on a Sunday afternoon at my auntie's house. Almost all the films I saw that I was inappropriately young to see were at my auntie's house on a Sunday afternoon. And Blazing Saddles I must have seen when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Okay.
And it, you know, it was just at the time, and still is, one of the funniest films I've ever seen. The humor throughout is just incredible. The performances, it's set. I'd already seen Stir Crazy by this point,
right? And
so Gene Wilder was already one of my favorite actors, and in this it just solidified him, because I thought, oh wow, he's actually cool in this. He's a cool cowboy in this. And I was saying this the other day, that Gene Wilder is such an absolute legend. I saw Rhinoceros the other day. I don't know if you've seen that, the UNESCO American Film Theatre thing. It's crazy film, but Gene Wilder is amazing. It's Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel again. And Cleveland Little as Bart, I thought it's just one of the coolest characters I'd ever seen as a kid. And obviously as a kid I didn't understand quite a lot of the satire of it, and the kind of the racism, as in the satirizing of the racism.
Yeah.
But what it did was it made me ask all the questions to my parents and this is how I feel like it's affected my life forever, because it gave me quite a clear, I think, understanding of racism from like such a young age. Because my parents just said, I was like, why are they being mean to him? Why are they calling him these names and stuff? They said, well, because he's black. And I was like, so? And they're like, well, a lot of people in these olden days and less olden days didn't like that, and so they didn't have black guys being sheriffs and stuff, and so it made me think. And these questions were, things that were in my head from such a young age that I feel like it set me on a good path to to understanding the world a bit more, and not being a terrible racist. And yeah, it's just stayed with me forever. That's the cleverness of it, the brilliance of it. Mel Brooks, I think it's Mel Brooks' best film. A lot of people may disagree. Some people say Young Frankenstein, very good also. But Blazing Saddles for me is it. And I love every set piece, every little moment, even like the ending where it just it breaks I don't know how many walls it breaks.
I was going to say, how does a 6-year-old you compute the breaking of a fourth wall?
It just seemed normal. I don't know. Again, I wonder how much that played a part in me getting into film, because it obviously showed the artifice of film. And I wonder, did that like play a part in me thinking, oh, these things are made, right? This is not a historical document. This is something that some guys put together. I mean, obviously I recognized Mel Brooks as the number of characters that he played as well. I mean, my dad he was like, you're going to like this film, son, there's farting in it. And he was correct. And if anyone's seen any of my short films and my first film, Guardians, you'll realize that I like that kind of humor. Head on the Vine has none of that.
It is amazing for what is a very sophisticated takedown of, not exactly a hard thing to take down, but of the wrongs of racism in society versus, a not racist society. And then an iconic scene in it is just a bunch of men eating beans and farting, which is the most simplest of absurd jokes.
It completely runs the gamut of every level of sophistication, from the puerile to the absolute brilliant, and that's why it's amazing, because it has a lack of arrogance to it, because I'm gonna play every level here. I'm gonna have farts, I'm gonna have dancing, I'm gonna have fourth wall breaking, I'm gonna have double entendres, I'm gonna have stupid wordplay, and I'm gonna have epic takedowns of racist America. you don't get that anymore.
No, and you've also got that. There's that lovely moment where Cleavon is holding himself hostage and threatening everybody he's going to. I mean, which is just a genius piece of theatre, really, isn't it? In a way,
it's superb. It's superb, and I love it. I love it. Look at that.
There we go. There's our 5 minutes. Fantastic. Right now, you're taking, for the next film, you're taking me into new territory. So this is a film I've not seen. So we're jumping into 1997 for Henry Fool. Do you want to tell us where this fits into your film life?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even know how I came across it. I think I got it on X Rental when I was in university. You know, Henry Fool by Hal Hartley, and I had read about it in Empire magazine. I think.
Okay.
That it had won an award at Cannes, and Hal Hartley's name had sort of been dotted around because he was sort of that same generation as the great indie wave of Soderbergh and Tarantino, and so Hal Hartley was there, but Hal Hartley was so much more low key and strange and different and sort of, what's the words I'm looking for? Not bland, mundane.
Yeah.
But not. And you know, Amateur, I think, was his most famous film, I think, at the time. And I just watched it. I just watched it one day on a whim, and I was just absolutely taken aback by it because it's the most strange film. It's basically about this guy who's a garbage collector, with absolutely no life and no personality, who encounters the lodger who's living in the basement of the house he lives in with his mum and his dad, which is Henry Fool, who is this insanely garrulous guy who just can't stop talking. And is he a bullshit artist? You don't know. He just talks so eloquently. And he's also a complete hedonist who he drinks, smokes, has sex with anything that he can find. But the way Hal Hartley does it, it's all through, basically Henry Fool encourages the garbage collector. I forgot his first name. Someone Grimm, isn't it?
Simon.
And Simon Grimm. Shit. And he encourages him to write, and he ends up writing this poem that you never hear the words of this poem, but the poem affects everyone in this really dramatic way. Like a woman who doesn't speak starts to sing, and people start to cry, or people suddenly start like having sex. It's just this weird poem that is, from the feedback you get from the people that read it, it's almost like pornographic and stuff, but you never get to hear what the words are. And so his career as a writer suddenly starts to go slowly up and up and up, whereas Henry Fool, who believes himself to be this incredible raconteur, and he's written his own memoir, which is an incredible memoir, which will blow the world apart, he says. But it turns out that's terrible. And he becomes the garbage man, while Simon Grimm becomes a poet laureate. But there's all this stuff that's going on within it. But what really got me was the style of it. That like Simon Grimm, like literally barely speaks through the entire film, and Henry Fool just speaks entirely through the entire film. And it's such a still film. And I'm a writer that loves, or did love, loads and loads and loads of words. When I was doing theatre, I loved words. And it was my revisiting after I moved to London of Henry Fool that made me change the way I wrote. It made me change the way I thought about writing and what I could do differently to convey all these stuff, rather than churning out all these words that I loved. I thought I could do this differently, and it was almost entirely down to Henry Fool. And
by the way, I love that about a film you can watch a while ago, and then when you're at a different stage of your life, you can rewatch it, and it helps you reassess what you're doing.
No, absolutely. And you know, the first time round, I watched in university, and I loved it, and I loved the Henry Fool part. But it was all the other parts that got me the second time I watched it. It's like Parker Posey is in it as the sister who's just like utterly frustrated by everything and really angry all the time, and then you've got Adrian Shelley, who's this overly aggressive character who just entirely hangs out in a convenience store with Kevin Corrigan, and she makes Simon Grimm kiss her bare ass at one point in some sort of weird bullying. And but then they all read this poem and it changes them all in this state. It's a profound film. It's a bizarre film. And it's a very sort of mundane film, except for Henry Fool, who just can't be anything but the opposite of all these people. And it's such a hard film to explain, but I love it. And it changed me. So there we go.
Well, I think you did a grand job of trying to explain it. And certainly it was intriguing enough, certainly from my point of view, to make me want to see it. It sounds like a belter.
I love it.
Now, that's your 3 films. You've told us about Dead and the Vine, which we all have fingers crossed, wish you luck for where the sales agents and distributors and whoever else in the chain gets for everyone to see it and for UK premiere. But the 3 films are very different. Do you think there's a thread that puts them together? Because they're your 3 films. Is there anything about them, do you think, that they've got in common that that when you look at them in the round, now you've talked about them together?
I think if I was being, I guess this is what translates to my work, is they're all about lost men.
Yeah.
You get me? Because obviously Bart is put into this, and obviously the Waco Kid, both men isolated and in a world that they're not familiar with, or they don't understand, or they don't want to be in. Making Fright is a very extreme version of that. It is literally a man in a descent to hell in a place that he desperately wants to get out of, but he seemingly can't, and it's his own fault as well. And Henry Fool, it's these 2 men who, in their own very different ways, are isolated from their own realities. One is avoiding it, one is trying to absorb it too much. And Henry Fool, I think, in a sort of roundabout way, was quite an influence on Guardians. When I was talking to David and Matt about their relationship and their characters, that one is Matt's character is very much isolated from society, from his own life, and he's finding refuge in this house. And whereas David's character was a man filling his empty life full of lies and full of tales and stuff, and it's not dissimilar from Henry Fool. Well, I can't compare the quality. I think that's one sort of obvious strand. I think there's a vein of humor that I appreciate through all 3. That aside from Blazing Saddles, you wouldn't say Henry Fool is definitely funny. It's meant to be funny, but to say it's a comedy would be And Waking Fright is also funny, and it's definitely meant to be funny, but it is definitely not a comedy.
No, it's humor. Its humor is definitely pitch black if you're going to find it funny.
Absolutely. And so I would say I love that kind of humor. I love that kind of I love the tonal shifts of all 3 of those films as well.
Yeah.
Whereas, Blazing Saddles walks that amazing line of really quite dark and horrible moments.
Yeah.
Where they undercut it with incredible humor. And, Waking Fright in sort of an almost inverse, has these unfeasibly dark moments but they're still sort of kind of funny because these people are sort of ridiculous.
Yeah, the absurdity is what sort of blows out of it, isn't it? In the end, it's like it's grim and it's vile, and then when you step back from the grim and vileness, you're like, that's absurd that people.
Yeah, it gets to an extremity of the film where you think this is just insane now. This is just crazy, and I think Henry Fool, the characters are so extreme from each other. That everything happens in between. That there is so many shifts. There's so many bizarre things that happen in Henry Fool, where you're just not expecting them because Henry Fool himself is a impulsive character that can barely contain his own, impulses. And whereas Simon Grimm is the opposite. He doesn't dare act on anything until So I'd say shifts.
Brilliant. Well, it just gives me to say, thank you very much for giving us time on the Britflicks podcast.
Thank you very much for having me back again. Always a pleasure.
Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Take as little as 3 minutes to see if you could save on motorcycle insurance with Progressive. Come on, you've spent more time than that trying to name your bike.
How about the Crusher? I guess it's not really crushing anything. The Silver Bolt? No. Oh, what about Pepper? Mysterious. Is it a pet or a condiment? Surprise! It's a motorcycle. No, that's stupid.
Get a quote in as little as 3 minutes at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.